Welcome back. I'm delighted to be joined by the Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt. Jeremy, you've just announced a whole new approach to mental health. One of the commitments you're making is that fewer people with mental health issues will end up in police cells. So where are they going to go?
Well, what we need is to look after them in the NHS. Good morning, Robert, by the way, and thank you for inviting me onto the programme. I mean, at the moment...
But where are they going to go in the NHS? Because, you know, the NHS doesn't have the beds, it doesn't have the... Where?
Well, that is why we are undergoing probably the biggest expansion of mental health anywhere in Europe at the moment.
Well, you're undergoing it, but I talk to mental health doctors and they say the money is not getting through to them.
Well, if you look at the actual facts in terms of the money, an independent NHS report a couple of months ago said that there's 1.4 billion more being spent on mental health compared to 3 years ago, about 120,000 more people.
It's been allocated, but is it getting through? As I say, I talk to mental health doctors and they say their resources are not increasing.
This is actually what's being spent, and we're actually treating around 120,000 more people a year. But what this is really about today is if you are a parent who has a child with some really serious psychological illnesses, what you want is for that child to be treated by the NHS. But too often what happens is that the first line of help you get is from the police service, and you can end up being in a police cell, and that can make the condition worse.
It's appalling, isn't it?
It's obviously bad for the police. And so what we need to do is to improve what we call in the NHS our crisis care response, to make sure...
So how quickly will you be able to provide alternative facilities so that the police do not lock up vulnerable people?
Well, we are making good progress.
But how long?
Well, we said that between now and 2020, in order to deliver this commitment, that we will recruit an extra 10,000 professionals into mental health services, because it's not just about money, it's actually having the people who can deliver the services you need. But this will mean that we have to do crisis care better, and this is part of what's called parity of esteem. So that we changed the law in 2012, and we said that mental and physical health should be treated equally, what's called parity of esteem. But at the moment, if you have a mental health crisis, you don't get as good care as people who have a stroke or a heart attack.
This terribly important, and if you talk to mental health campaigners, they were shocked when, with your reforms, your proposed reforms to the personal injury payments, that they said discriminated against people with mental health issues.
Well, we listened very, very carefully to what they said, because we absolutely want to make sure that doesn't happen. But there's another...
Well, they fear it is happening.
Yeah, but there's another... I mean, if we talk about discrimination against people with mental health conditions, that's something else that Theresa May has announced today, which is another type of discrimination, which is 1 in 6 of us has at any one time a mental health condition, depression, anxiety, and it hits anyone. I mean, it doesn't matter, you can be successful, have a happy family life. These things really just come out of the blue. And what is awful is some people find they lose their job because of it. And the reason for that is that you're only currently in the law protected against discrimination if it's been a continuous mental health condition for 12 months on the trot. And obviously for a lot of these conditions they come and they go. So Theresa May is saying today she wants to change that.
So how will you change it? Will you set up the equivalent of the kind of commissions we have for gender inequality and race inequality? Will there be a body to which people can complain if they feel they're discriminated against?
Well, I don't think this is about more commissions. This is about the law protecting people against discrimination for a mental health condition in the same way it protects you against discrimination if you're disabled. And why is it that this is important? Because Theresa May, when she was on the steps of Downing Street, when she became... Let me just finish this.
Sure.
She said that she had an economic mission, yes, to deliver the best deal for Britain on Brexit and protect people's jobs, but also a social mission. She used the phrase, a country that works for everyone. And clearly at the moment, if you have mental health problems, we are not doing as well as we would like to. Although it has to be said, many people would say we have some of the best mental health provision in Europe, but it's still not good enough.
Well, many people would say we have hugely inadequate mental health provision. Now, but on that point about discrimination, you know, everybody, I think, listening or watching today would agree that ending discrimination is a good thing, but we have no detail.
Well, I think it's pretty detailed today, if I may say.
Not on
we've said we are going to replace the 1983 Mental Health Act. We've said that we are going to change the law so that people do not suffer discrimination for mental health conditions in the way they currently do.
But hang on a second. If you are suffering from a mental health problem, you are probably the last person who is going to be capable of going to law to protect yourself. So many will say, in the absence of a body that effectively comes in and helps you, nothing is going to change.
Well, this isn't just about asking people with mental health problems to take their cases to the law. This is actually asking employers to change their behaviour. Now, employers don't want to be on the wrong side of the law. They do respond to changes in law on discrimination. It's about the personnel departments of companies understanding that when it comes to mental health, this is not something that's abnormal. This is something that's very, very common. And we all of us in our life have crises at different moments. Another part of the changes that we're announcing today is to have mental health first aid in every school in the country to help prepare people
We
for
haven't got a lot of time, so I must now move on to the wider NHS. On your watch, per capita spending will rise, well, actually it will fall over the 10 years since 2010 from 2010 to 2020. Resources going into the NHS are a fraction under this government of what they've been in, on average, since the health service was created, which is why every doctor says to me there is a crisis.
Well, something you said is right, and something you said is profoundly wrong.
What's wrong?
And so what is wrong, first of all, is when it comes to funding, we had a very difficult period after 2010, the austerity period, when we were dealing with the financial crisis of 2008, getting the economy back on its feet. But since then, in the last 3 years...
Well, I looked at the period 2010 to 2020 is the period I was looking at, and over that period, per capita spending is down.
Well, let me just finish, because, as I say, if you look at the period since 2010, there are really two halves. There's the first period where NHS spending wasn't cut, but it didn't go up by very much. But then, since then, we've actually spending now £6.5 billion a year more on the NHS than we were spending.
Which your own boss says is barely enough, Simon Stevens.
Well, that's not quite right, actually. This is actually the amount of money that he negotiated and said he needed for his plan. But what he specifically...
He very publicly said that he did not think it was a generous settlement.
Well, let me tell you where... I think it has been very tough for the NHS since 2010 because they've had typically 4% increases in funding since the founding of the NHS. We haven't been able to do that.
Yep.
However, the funding has been much more generous in terms of the increases in recent years, and we would like to continue that. But the question is, if we're going to do that...
Will there be more resources if Theresa May wins? Will the rate of spending in the NHS go up?
Well, if Theresa May wins, her priority will be to get the best Brexit deal for Britain that protects the economy, protects all the jobs that we've created in the last 7 years, nearly 3 million jobs, that pay the taxes for the NHS, so that we can then fund the NHS. And, you know,
well, people will notice you aren't making the kind of commitment that Labour is making to increase funding. But I've also just got to put... We asked our viewers to ask the questions that were on their minds. So Sean says... is my wife having an affair? She works in the NHS and goes in all hours, including weekends, but we know it's not supposed to be 24/7. In other words, people in the NHS feel that you are asking them to work too much, too long.
Well, people in the NHS are working incredibly hard, and what I'm doing to try and relieve that pressure is to get more doctors and nurses into the NHS. And since I've been Health Secretary, for example, we have 15,000 more nurses on the back of significant extra funding that's going in. But I don't make any apology for saying that I also want our care in the NHS to be the very best in the world. And where we have problems, like, for example, we know that mortality rates for people admitted at weekends are higher than people admitted at the week, and we want to do something about that, and that does mean that there are parts of the NHS where we need to improve the provision of weekends.
We had that debate, you know, about a year ago, and I must just therefore put to you, so on the hashtag Ask Hunt, Jonathan Ashworth, your opposite, sent in a question. 1.8 million people waited longer than 4 hours in A&E, up from about 350,000 in 2009-10. That's a dramatic increase. That is a failure, isn't it?
Well, I'm delighted that Jonathan's watching the programme this morning, and what I would say to him, which he didn't choose to mention in that question, is that compared to when Labour were in office, if you take that 4-hour standard, 2,000 more people are being seen within 4 hours.
But when will the target be met? When will that target be met?
And let me just ask a question.
Come on, Jeremy. When will the target be met on the 4-hour waiting time?
Well, it's a very important target. And
will it be met in the next Parliament if you win?
Yes. And we have said that we will, much sooner than that, we said we want to get back to meeting that target next year. But if Jonathan Ashworth is watching this programme, you might want to ask him back how we could have delivered those extra 2,000 people being seen within 4 hours every day if we cut the NHS budget, as Labour chose to do in Wales.
Jeremy, lovely to see you. We hope you'll come back before the election. Don't go away, because Nigel Farage will be here after the break.